I take that as we're live.
We're not gonna do that.
Excellent. All right, so let's go ahead and kick off this city council meeting. It's September 23rd, 2025. And we're down at the mill. We are recording this and we'll publish it later on our YouTube page. So with that, I'll call the meeting to order and ask all to rise for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is it high school civics class time already?
Yeah.
AP Gov, nice. Glad to have you all here. Come more than once. I know the requirement's only once, but we're actually somewhat enjoyable. Both semesters. Oh, because it's AP. Nice. I like it. All right, can we get a roll call?
Sure. Councilmember Daughtry,
Present.
Councilmember Peter Sagan,
Present.
Councilmember Donahue, who should be online.
Present.
Councilmember Shipman. Present. Councilmember Jorstad. Present. Councilmember Ewing.
Present.
Councilmember Hope.
Here.
Great. And Ryan, if it's okay, I'm gonna have Kim do the approval of agenda.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we have a couple of things to add to the agenda before approving it. Action item B, a professional service agreement for the 91st Avenue design. And then a C, an executive session regarding potential litigation. So can I get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the agenda has been approved.
You gotta
We
vote
should
on
vote.
it.
Oh, do we have to vote? Oh, sorry. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Now it's approved.
All right, perfect. We like a voted on a motion. Good job, Kim. All right, let's go to guest businesses then. Anya.
Yeah, Shannon. Kathy? Right, well. All right, while they are logging in, there we go. This is Compensation Connections. This is the consulting firm that is conducting the city's salary survey this year for 2025. And they started the work over the summer and they're here to present to the city council the preliminary results in a summary form and try to get some further direction from council tonight. And Shannon, can you make sure she can share her screen, Kelly? Looks like I can. Great. Take her away when you're ready.
All right. And I believe this was included in the council materials as well. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for having us back to, as Anya said, present some of the initial findings of the study, and then we'd like to talk with you about next steps and get your direction. So the compensation study was included the non-represented positions and Teamsters positions. And in terms of the study itself, the primary activities are, of course, researching the market data, so what other employers are paying for similar jobs, and then reviewing the current pay range structure. So that's also referred to sometimes as salary schedules. So looking at those compared to the market data, doing that analysis job by job as well. And then determining potential budget impacts once we have some direction from you all. And please feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions. So just as a reminder that market data sources, where did we get this employer data? We utilized several cities in the area for data sources, and you can see them all listed there. So I'll give you a moment to look at that. And then in addition to the municipal data sources, we also utilized what's referred to as published survey sources. So these are surveys that third-party companies prepare. They gather the information from employers. So it's employer-submitted data. And with these published survey sources, we're able to kind of refine some of the filtering or data sets that we look at. But they are listed here in terms of, we looked at government agencies with the Economic Research Institute survey and the Milliman Public Employers Survey. So that's in addition to the municipalities that we also researched. And then the 4 surveys listed at the bottom: Comp Analyst, Comp Data, Milliman Northwest, and Milliman Puget Sound. Those are focused on all types of organizations within our market to help sort of round out the general labor market that the city operates in. So when we do this research, we are, of course, looking for similar, jobs at these other employers and in these survey sources. And we're focusing on job content, the purpose of the job duties, and the qualifications required for the job. So we don't necessarily match like job title to job title. We're really trying to make sure that we understand your jobs and look for representative jobs, in the various market sources. And as we go through that process, best practice is trying to find at least 3 job matches. So 3 other, data points per job. And because we had, just a pretty robust data set that we're working with here, we actually averaged 9 matches per job. So, we want at least 3 and we got 9 per job, which is fabulous. And just to reiterate something I said a moment ago, when we do this research, eventually collect all this data, we do make sure that it is scoped for or set for Lake Stevens or Puget Sound, so that we are looking at, similar cost of labor and comparing apples to apples. Something else to keep in mind is, that some of the data is published or effective at varying points in time. And so what we do is we age all the data forward to January 1st, 2026, to make sure that it is all at the same sort of effective date. And we use an aging factor of 4% per year to do that. Most of this data is from 2025. So just to clarify, I think actually almost all of it is from 2025. So if we are aging it, it might just be, 1 or 2% to kind of true it up to January 2026. All right, so that's the process that we went through in terms of collecting this data. And what I'd like to share now is some high-level information about what we found related to, the market data compared to your pay range midpoints. So this is preliminary. Anya is still going through and looking at all of the job matching and making sure that she is comfortable with that. So this is preliminary data. That's for the purpose of this conversation. So for the analysis, we went through and looked at the market data for each job, and then calculated sort of a difference there, and I'll talk about that in a moment. And, each of your jobs are assigned into pay ranges. And so that, lets us be able to calculate basically a representative difference between your pay range midpoint and the market data. So when we look at the data on the chart here, we are comparing your pay range midpoint to the 60th percentile of the market. That's the city's stated market reference point. And so, for example, we did that on average for all of the non-represented jobs. And so the current pay range midpoints for all of the non-represented jobs, that's about 94.6, so almost 95% of the 60th percentile. So that's really close to your market reference point. In contrast, the Teamsters jobs, we did the same exercise and looked at how the Teamsters jobs compare to market. And again, this is preliminary right now. We are still refining the data. But that came in at 88, almost 89% of the market. So a little lower when compared to the market than the non-represented jobs on average. And then the chart at the bottom right, that just simply breaks out the jobs by department. So this does commingle, non-represented and Teamsters jobs. But we thought you might find it interesting to look at this data by department instead. And the chart does go from high to low in terms of relative comparison back to the market. And so we are seeing, when you look at this data, actually, I'm sorry, I misspoke. The chart is alphabetical. But when you look at this data, you can see that there are a couple of departments that sort of stand out on average as lagging the market a little bit. So information technology is a little behind market. Parks and recreation is a little behind market. And then police and public works are further behind the market reference point.
Shannon, I got a question.
Mm-hmm.
When you have the quote unquote market in your statement there, you mean all of the market data sources that you shared with us at the beginning?
Yeah.
It's an amalgamation of all of those data sources, not just the cities that were represented on that chart.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And for those in the audience that are unfamiliar with what Teamsters represents, Teamsters is a collective bargaining unit that covers parks and public works field employees and non-technical staff. And so when you look at the difference between the department breakdown and public works, that's why you see a different percentage for Teamsters versus public works, because the public works department encompasses all public works employees, including Teamsters.
All right. So I'll go to the next slide unless there are other questions at the moment. Okay. So just to provide a little more information in terms of specific analysis that we did by job. So we were just looking at kind of averages. This is now looking at the jobs when we compare the range midpoint versus market data and the number of jobs that might be falling sort of around market. So the first chart on the upper left is all of the non-represented jobs. And so when we see here, the large green wedge is about 51%, so half of the non-represented jobs, which is 34 jobs. We found those to fall within market is how we refer to that. So within plus or minus 5% of the market reference point. So that's great, frankly. And then in the purple wedge, we found that 34% of the jobs are falling, between 6 to 10% under that market reference point. So that's about 23 jobs. And then the blue wedge is jobs that are falling more than 10% under. And that happens to be 10 jobs or 15% of the total non-represented jobs. So that's the non-represented side. On the Teamsters chart on the right-hand side, there is not a green wedge. So that instead the wedge starts with 6 to 10% under market. So there's 3 jobs. This is a much smaller, job sample. So that's 27%, but it's 3 jobs. And then the blue wedge is 8 jobs are more than 10% under the market reference point. And again, just as a reminder, this is preliminary information. We're still going through and doing a final review and scrub, but we thought this was good to bring this forward to you to help you understand kind of where we are right at the moment. So any questions about this information? Okay. So this is where we want to talk with you about what we're suggesting for next steps and get some direction from you or hear your thoughts. So we do have sort of the 2 groups of jobs, the non-represented jobs. At this point, what we're suggesting is that the city maintain the current pay range structure, just the way it is. And for jobs that are significantly under market, that we look at moving those into, a new pay range assignment that reflects the current market for that particular job. And then as part of that, we would want to review compression between jobs. So look at jobs in a series, maybe there's a senior job and an intermediate job, and we might be looking at moving the intermediate job. What does that mean for the senior job? We wouldn't want them to be in the same salary band, for example. And then determine what might be the potential fiscal impact of all of that work. So that's for the non-represented jobs. The Teamsters jobs, we do suggest that the city consider adjusting the pay range structure as a whole for the Teamsters jobs, given that at least preliminarily they appear as a group to be, the pay ranges appear to be under market as a group, and then to map the jobs into the updated pay range structure. So just assign them into a grade, a range, a salary band that aligns with the market. And again, determining the potential fiscal impact. Now, with the Teamsters, that is all to be bargained. So this would definitely be more of doing this work to help inform how the city might want to proceed with discussions with the union. So I'm going to stop there and just very curious about what you think about this. We have not done this yet. I don't have, the actual, what would be the fiscal impact to this. We wanted to, when I say we, Kathy, myself, Anya, wanted to bring this to you all for your consideration and see if this makes sense as a potential next step. And then we could do this work and come back with some numbers for you all. So what are your thoughts or questions you might have?
Well, I'll jump in. This is helpful information. Thank you for the time that you've put into bringing this to our attention. I feel, given the current budget situation our city is in, it's not possible to make any decisions or to give any direction without seeing the numbers and the fiscal impact. I think we're at a place right now where those numbers are pretty important, and we're going to have some tough decisions to make. And I think having those numbers would be super helpful, but I certainly don't feel comfortable weighing in on what decision we might go in without seeing what that fiscal impact might be.
Do you think that you'd be interested in seeing sort of the suggestions, what would be the potential fiscal impact, like taking that approach to try to model that where we keep for the non-represented, keep the pay ranges basically the same and then look at maybe sliding a few of the jobs around.
I'd rather see both options.
I think that's what I was gonna say. Personally, not to speak
Yeah.
for all of council, I think that the looking at options would be helpful, given your different recommendations.
Mhm.
But I also think I would be interested in hearing some analysis about what the ramifications might be if we chose to not adjust wages as well.
Do the wages also take into consideration benefits in your analysis, or is it just payroll as far as wages?
It's wages only. Mhm. So,
And no evaluation of benefits and how that would factor into the final cost of payroll.
right. So for the market study specifically, we are looking at wages. We're looking at your wages compared to other wages. So we do a parity there, just to be clear. Anya, I don't know if you want to speak to the benefits side of things.
It's possible we can run scenarios on how it would determine like total cost with benefits. Once we provide like the recommended ranges, we can work with finance team to try to do some estimates and projections.
So we're making the assumption that all of those cities that were surveyed, the benefits are pretty much similar to ours? Do we have any outliers, I guess, that offer something different than what we're offering? Do we know?
We have not done a benefit study, the comprehensive with non-represented staff, to my knowledge, no.
Because I know when you're in negotiations with, say, the Teamsters, that's part of the whole package
Mhm.
is wage and benefits. Everything from PTO to health benefits to retirement benefits, right? And with non-representative jobs, I don't know how much that's discussed when we discuss wages. So I think that would be really helpful to know when we're making these decisions.
Mayor and Jean, for our represented folks, is healthcare part of the TCC, the total cost of compensation? Because often it's not.
Again, all we're looking at here is just the salaries.
Okay.
And so we haven't done a comparison.
I guess what they're getting at is, I'll be more blunt, we're a smaller to mid-sized city and we have to compete on the market with Everett, Linwood, Marysville, Seattle, East Side that has more, and we've talked about this before, and they pluck our employees. So what does it look like for us to operate with almost a $5 million deficit between the 2 years? And not the potential, really, as Gary pointed out at our retreat, to have economic development. We struggle on that. And so really going forward, what does retaining those employees look like? I think we'd all love to give them what the market wants and what would keep them here. But the reality is we may have a problem with that.
So to answer in short, like TCC, we've looked at that with the guild before, and that's how we negotiate the guild contract, and we look at that. And we analyze all the different benefit packages, and we use that for negotiations. We have not done that, to my knowledge, for non-represented staff, and it's outside the scope of this contract that we have with Compensation Connections. So we would have to regroup to see if we could add that. And I haven't talked to our consultant about that, or see how we would accomplish that, because that would be a big task to go out to each city and gather all the benefits.
I think it's safe for Gary's question that most cities are somewhat in the same ballpark. Public
It's similar.
employers.
Yeah.
I think most cities are involved with AWC trust and health benefit stuff, and
Mhm.
they're all pretty light programs and across the board, easily accessible by most cities.
And back in 2021, we did a vacation accrual analysis. So it's a few years old, but that's when we brought our vacation accruals up. So because we were falling behind there. But from what I've seen, employee handbooks is we're fairly competitive and comparable to our cities, but have not done a full-on analysis spreadsheet of every single city.
All right, we got any more questions for these ladies?
Yeah, I have a quick question. It's kind of a long one, but I guess what I'm wondering, and this is probably outside the scope of the analysis, but I think to Commissioner Hill's point, one of the things we're kind of concerned with here is the sustainability. If I recall, this list of cities was put together based on, kind of being within the ballpark as far as what they pay. But I'm curious if there's even just a hint of data in this analysis that goes to, how many other cities are facing a similar situation to us where maybe they're not in a sustainable pay system. I know there's at least 2 cities on that list that have had to have their own difficult budget conversations. And so I'm just curious, how representative are they really when it comes to longevity and the sustainable pay scale, and if that's accounted for at all in this analysis?
Yeah, so what we've collected is what the cities are paying right now for their respective jobs. And like you, we have heard from and worked with a few cities that are on that list that are having their own budget challenges right now, and facing that. So it's unclear what the specific ramifications of their situations will be on wages, looking at wages in 2026. I couldn't hazard a guess around that, but we definitely have heard from numerous cities and counties in the state that are experiencing budget shortfalls. So
Okay,
for what that's worth.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll just add, I concur with Councilmember Jorstad's, caution with given our fiscal situation, the sustainability. I mean, we can't sustain what we currently have. So adding to that, compounding that needs to be looked at very carefully.
All right, anything else? Great, appreciate the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right, let's move to citizens' comments. I'm going to open up the floor to citizens' comments. First, anyone online who wishes to address the council?
Don't see any hands up. So again, as the mayor stated, if you'd like to speak to the council in our Zoom meeting, if you could raise your digital hand, I can let you into the meeting.
Okay, hearing none, all I have in only green sheet I have is Nathan Pack. Nathan's name and address in 3 minutes.
Yeah, Nathan Packard. Excuse me, I live on 117th Drive Southeast. Here to talk about the budget, timely discussion based on what you were just going through. I have watched the entirety of your amazing 7.5-hour session, admittedly at 1.5 speed, to make it go a little bit faster. Having said that, just wanted to make a few comments, read a few quotes to make a point. One is part of the mayor's message. While these priorities, you laid out some bold priorities, while these priorities set a bold course, we must remain cautious on spending until additional revenues are secured to ensure sustainability and long-term financial health. Connected to that then were the multiple plots showing, as was just discussed, right, our reserves burning down fairly rapidly. There was a comment multiple times in the presentation that said this does not mean that the city will run out of money, but instead illustrates the path the city could realize if no adjustments are made during the first 2 years. So after all of that, there was a lot of interesting stuff about wish lists and priorities and goals and what we wish we could do but can't. So I appreciate all of the complexity associated with there. I will just say I appreciate also the comment that said it is the fiscal responsibility of the city council to periodically review all available revenue sources. I would also like to add one thing I didn't see in there was the fiscal responsibility to explore additional cuts to the current budget to make sure that we can balance our budget and put ourselves in a good position. I only saw in the meeting, hey, well, I don't want to say only, a lot of recommendations were made on ways that we could avoid cost, but those were avoiding future cost beyond the current cost. I didn't see anything in the discussion around how do we cut back. Not that we want to cut back, not that we want to drop any of our staff that we have. We've made a lot of good progress. We're doing a lot of good things in the community, but I am an advocate for a balanced budget, or at least a more balanced budget. Particular, again, I'm concerned about the trend line going down after 2 years. Again, maybe that changes. There's still work to be done to see how that changes based on the input from the budget discussion. My put is simply that I would like to see what a balanced budget looks like. Have we done the exercise to say, if we were to balance or get closer to balanced, what does that look like? What would the implications be? And at least being able to see that and make a conscious decision of what that would mean. And maybe we don't need to go all the way to balanced, but from what I've seen, I'd like just to get closer to that. I'd like to see a 4-year outlook to going to that reserve fund to zero rather than just the 2-year cycle, so that we have time to explore opportunities for further revenue through economic development, et cetera. Hopefully taxes aren't needed to make that happen, and we're able to find that revenue through other sources. Thank you.
Thank you, Nan. Okay, let's move forward with council business. Council Vice President.
Oh. Okay, Councilmember Hilt, let's start with you.
I have nothing.
Councilmember Ewing,
Nothing.
Councilmember Jurstad,
Nothing this evening. Thank you.
Councilmember Daughtry,
Well, I have nothing.
Councilmember Peter Shagan.
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
Okay, and lastly with me, I don't have anything either, but I did want to say the city released that Lake Stevens is the 10th safest city in Washington State. And when I looked at the population of the cities that made top 10, with the exception of one city, we have a significantly higher population. So I found that to make it even more impressive that our city at the top 10, there's only one with more people than us. And most of them had significantly less. And I think that speaks highly of not only our police department, but of our citizens as well, and of our community. So I just wanted to acknowledge that.
And Ryan.
Ryan,
Yes, actually, I do have something.
Councilmember Donahue.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so really quick, last week I attended the planning commission meeting. They continued their work through the critical areas ordinance update, this time focusing on updates to best available science, particularly related to riparian or river areas and the buffers around there. I won't get too into the weeds on that. The second thing we discussed that I also believe is on our agenda for tonight, at least in part, is continued discussion on step housing, particularly emergency housing and shelters, and what sort of buffer areas we might want to consider around those types of sites. And I'm sure it'll come up again, but I'll just throw out a quick nod to our city interns. You'll see in your packet all the different permutations of the boundary areas and what those could look like and how they affect the available areas. That was all put together by a young man who's working with the city and did a phenomenal job. So that's all I've got.
All right, great. Appreciate everyone's report. As for myself, last week I attended the Association of Washington Cities Board of Directors meeting, and we established our legislative priorities for the year. It was a good meeting. Seems like the theme or the thought behind this coming session. So for those who don't know, the Washington State Legislature meets on a budget year and then meets on a short year. This coming year is the short year. It's a 60-day session. So really, they've got to like pack a lot in 60 days. And so not a lot really happens. I shouldn't say that, but a lot could happen. But then it's also an election year. So there's a lot of thought that this session will kind of be a status quo session so that people can run on whatever they need to run on when they get home. So we'll see how that works out. We do have upcoming on October 6th, a mayor's town hall. So it'll be me and it'll be a couple of my staff members. Council, you are invited to come. You will have a seat in the chief seats. I'll take the questions. So you're probably okay with that. Maybe not, maybe either way. That's October 6th. I invite all to come out for that. Should be a fun evening. We're going to do a presentation on what's going on in the city, all our great projects that are going on. And we're also going to do a project discussion about our APWA accreditation, and then we'll open the floor to questions. We'll do it right here at the mill. So 7 o'clock on the 6th of October. And that's all I have. Let's go to no reports. So let's do a consent agenda. I get a motion to pass the consent agenda, please.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to pass the consent agenda. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? All right, consent agenda passed. Let's go to action items. Aaron, are you Curtis tonight? Okay, great. Aaron, you have the floor for Lundin Light Repairs.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Gailey. Good evening, Mayor and Council. For those of you in the audience who don't know me, my name's Aaron Halverson. I'm the city's Public Works Director. This is a brief agenda item, and it really is just an update. I know there's a contract associated with it, but I think the key is the information. So in the spring on Lundin Parkway, one side of the road between 204 and State Route 9, the wiring between the lights, the street lights, and was taken. Anyway, the lights weren't working, and that's kind of how we found out. So the city worked with a electrical consultant to assess the damage and come up with a plan to remedy it. And this is the result. It's a $55,000 contract, a little bit less than $55,000 for an electrical company to go in and replace that stolen wiring and make all of the new connections and secure all of the boxes where the thieves gained access. Now, the natural question for us is, how many streetlights does the city own? And we own approximately, it's right around 90. Many of the streetlights in the city are on PUD power poles, and they take power from the overhead electrical line. So you'll see those all across the city. That's the most common type of streetlight. The other type, like we have here on Main Street and Lundin Parkway, those are owned by the city. And the city pays the utility bill for those. And they're mostly underground power they're all underground power between the lights. So the contractor is going to go pull the wiring, secure the lids, so it's much more difficult to enter the boxes, or hopefully nearly impossible without the right tools. And then the city is going to mimic that change, that improvement on every one of the light boxes that we own moving forward. And that's a matter of a budget savings effort rather than having a contractor go do it all at once. We're going to do that pretty rapidly. So anyway. So what we're asking you, council, to do is authorize the mayor to sign the contract with Service Electric for these necessary repairs, especially since the days are starting to get shorter. We'd love to have those lights on. Any questions?
Is this
Oh, yeah.
I have two questions, I guess. Cost to the city, and is there like an insurance claim that?
No, there's no insurance claim for this issue. I'm glad you brought that up, Councilmember Jorstad. So we're looking at that with our insurance authority now, as if we to determine whether or not we can insure these light poles and other poles in the city, other utilities like that, and whether or not that would make practical sense.
So is this not like city property that was stolen?
It is city property that was stolen.
Okay. But it's not covered under any.
It's not insured.
Policy.
Yeah.
Any city property has to be listed on our insurance schedule. And so we would have to go and individually list each pole or guardrail that we would want on the insurance schedule.
Right.
And so we're covered for liability for any of those things, but not for crime and fidelity or like property damage unless it's specifically listed.
So another important point, we're going to bring back a budget amendment. Barb will bring back a budget amendment for this effort. And then the other thing I would like to say is if anyone sees what looks like a contractor working in the roadway after hours, pulling wire into a black or white van or whatever it is, just call 911 and they'll go look at it.
Always the white van, geez.
No, sorry. Yep.
I have a quick question. Do we have an estimate of what it's going to cost to update that through the city to give us that protection?
Not yet, but I can bring that back.
And is that something our city employees can do, or is that something we'd have to contract out?
I expect our city employees to be able to do it, but if they can't, again, I'll bring that back. I imagine the fix we suggested and we expect is as welded plates on the lids that are provide a locking mechanism.
Now, can I get do you have more questions? Can I get action on this?
I move to authorize the mayor to sign whatever you need to sign to move this forward. Sorry, I don't have the words in front of me.
To sign the contract with Service Electric.
Thank you.
For an amount up to 55,000.
To sign the contract with Service Electric.
55,000?
Yes.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion for me to sign the Service Electric Streetlight Repair Contract, and I have a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you for that. And then I'm gonna bring up the walk on 91st Avenue Southeast Multi-Use Path Phase 2 Design Contract. Is that you, Aaron, as well?
Ben is going to introduce that
Oh, yeah.
agenda item.
Ben.
Yeah. Hello, Mayor, esteemed council. I'm Ben Armanaji. I'm the senior civil engineer with the city of Lake Stevens here. In your packet is a PSA for the 91st Southeast Multi-Use Path Phase 2. Phase 2 goes from 20th Street Southeast to 12th Street. This completes the last gap for sidewalks on 91st. We also obtained a Safe Routes to School grant from WashDOT, which helps cover some of the design of it and some of the costs of construction. And that scope and fee is a part of the packet. If you have any other questions, I'd be happy to answer those now.
Just to clarify, Ben, this contract is for engineering, geotechnical, environmental services only, correct?
The traffic engineering, or yes, all of the design
All the
services.
soft costs.
Yeah, so it will go all the way to 100% design and some bid services as well.
And I noticed in here, you're expecting to have this done before school starts in the fall of 26. What's the estimated time for this contract to be completed?
It will be, or for the entire we're hoping to finish design in March of 2026. And so we would be able to have construction start in June 2026 and be able to finish up before school starts that summer.
And my last question, I noticed on the last page there, the estimated cost, there's a management reserve description, unassigned services reserve to 45,000. Is the city not going to manage this construction project?
So the management reserve fee is if there's unexpected design changes, we find if that is something that we would have to authorize for the consultant to use. And so that's kind of a contingency. So we don't have to have a come back here and say, hey, can we have a little bit more money to finish the design?
Okay. And then I guess just an add-on one, do we have a funding source to actually build this?
So this is a transportation benefit program. So we do have that funding for it. We also have applied for another funding source as well through the Transportation Improvement Board for another $800K, and we'll be seeking those results soon.
So chances are this may be built, but chances are it may not be built next year.
No, I think we have the money, but if we get an additional 800K from TIB, then that just saves our money.
So-
Okay, all right.
Uses someone else's money.
I'd like to clarify a little bit on this. So we've been really successful on 91st Avenue Southeast in the first phase. That was mostly grant funded. So it was a TBP, Transportation Benefit Program funded project, which is a voter approved sales tax levy. And we were, like I said, very successful. And it looks like we're going to be successful on this effort as well, where we're going to use potentially, we're going to limit the TBP contributions to this project because we're receiving outside funding. That's great because what that does is stretches the dollars for the other projects on the list.
Yeah, because we're total on this is we're 2.3 total project,
Total cost is about 3.1.
3.1. And we've already received 500 from Safe Routes.
800.
So we're looking at another possible 800 from TIB.
Correct.
Okay.
And based on conversations with TIB as well, there are a lot of good sources, or there's multiple schools nearby. There's commercial development, so it has a decent chance of receiving that grant funding.
Okay.
So I got a couple questions. So I'm looking at the cost. So that's roughly $1,240 a linear foot. How does that compare to the previous projects? My understanding of that's significantly more than a regular sidewalk. I mean, it's already a flat, already paved road. I mean, you're basically elevating it. Help me understand why the costs are so significant.
So if we compare this to TBB 2 and 3, which was 91st Avenue South or phase 1, this one includes a lot more stormwater improvements. This section of road does not have a stormwater system, so that would have additional fees associated with that, with placing all the stormwater systems. Additionally, there are some walls associated with it because 91st does have some slopes there, so those are included in the project cost as well. And also there is some cultural resources included too. There's a wetland nearby, and so we have started some conversations with the tribe so they are aware of that this project is happening as well.
Yes, I think there's added complexity.
And that's
but-
fine. I don't need any further.
Okay,
explanation.
I will offer that we'll sharpen our pencils, and we always do. We start bigger, larger now, and we sharpen our pencils through the project.
But I'll just say that the first phase in 91st has been a huge success. I see tons of traffic along there, lots of people walking to Hagen, to walking to the restaurants there. So that's a big success. And I look forward to being able to walk to Costco without, risking my life after I, pass the other sections got into sidewalks. So what is the current width of the roadway? I see it's going down to 10.5 feet. What's the current width of the roadway there?
I'm just looking at my map right now. So the current width of the road is 38 feet with a vegetated shoulder on the side. And so we would still keep the bike lane on the half, reduce the drive lanes from 12.5 feet to 10.5 feet, have room for a planter strip, and then have a multi-use path on the side.
Perfect. And last question, the pedestrian scale lighting for those people like me that are unfamiliar with that, what is that?
So the pedestrian scale lighting will be lighting that will be applied at some of the intersections to help light up so people can be seen or be visible while that happens, as well as adding some additional illumination along the route as some of the existing street lighting does not illuminate the entire route.
Thank you.
So the audience, if you don't understand what we're talking from Lake Stevens Middle School sidewalk or walking path all the way down to 20th. So like you could go on your lunch break at Lake Stevens Middle School, walk to Costco, get your hot dog and get back in time for class safely. That's what we're talking about.
They don't eat hot dog, they eat pizza.
Well, they could get a pizza. Well, you could take pizza and wrap a hot dog in it.
Calzone.
Did you have a question?
I did. With regards to sidewalks in schools, do you have a plan for introducing sidewalks on 116th, 117th streets going to the high school?
Yeah, that's been a long discussion over the year. We'll talk to you about it afterwards.
And Mayor, I just had a quick question. So we just got these tonight. Does anyone online watching or anyone in present, do they have any of this that we're looking at?
Yeah, it's published to our agenda tonight.
It is published to the agenda. Okay, I just want to make sure everyone was aware of the budget impact because I find it impressive that the majority of it is funded by WASDOT Safe Routes and School Grants instead of locally. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that.
Yeah, and for that, I'm super grateful for the voters to pass the transportation benefit program. Because you have this pool of money that's used for these types of projects, what ends up happening is other agencies end up having money and they go, oh, you're gonna be able to spend and you have a shovel-ready project ready to go, like, let's throw you more money. And it just makes our money go further. Right.
I think one of the great things with our staff is that they've been able to have those projects already. And so we are well respected and we've been very successful at getting those grants and making our limited tax dollars stretch. I appreciate our staff and the good work that they're doing to help us receive those grants.
With that, can we get a motion?
Move to authorize the mayor to sign design contract with Prism Consulting Incorporated for 91st Street Avenue Southeast Multi-Use Path,
Second.
TBP -5.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And any opposed? Thank you very much for the work on that, Ben. Let's go to discussion items. I can never say that word, nor can I think most people can. Salmonid? Salmonid. Basins Plan Introduction.
Fish Basins
Just
Plan.
call it salmon.
Salmon it is. Just one moment. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. So, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Shannon Front. I'm the Environmental Programs Manager at the city. And tonight we're bringing to you an introduction of a project that we are starting to work on. It's the Salmonid Basins Plan or the Salmon Basins Plan. This is a project that's a watershed-based management plan that integrates drainage basins into elements of our comprehensive plan or other land use planning. It'll also help guide areas where we can look at retrofits for stormwater. We can look at areas for preservation or restoration. This is a GIS-based kind of approach to this plan. And tonight I have Jen Schmidt. She's with Herrera Environmental Consultants. We've hired Herrera to start this plan for us, and she's going to give the presentation tonight. This project was funded through the Department of Commerce as part of the Washington Climate Commitment Act. We received this grant funding. And so now we're just really getting into the project, and she's going to kick it off tonight to give you an introduction on this plan and what it's going to look like. And then she has a couple discussion questions for the council. So I'm going to let Jen take the stage, and you should just let it.
Yeah, thank you, Shannon, and I appreciate everyone's time and attention tonight. So as Shannon said, my name is Jen Schmidt. I'm with Herrera Environmental Consultants, and I'm the project manager on the consultant side for this work.
Excuse me, could you speak into the microphone?
Yes, yeah, sorry, I'm kind of notoriously soft-spoken too, so thank you. Okay. So an overview of the presentation tonight, we're going to talk about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what we've done to date, and next steps. And then at the end, we'll take general questions about the presentation or content. And then, as Shannon said, I've included a few discussion prompts to allow you to provide some additional input. So what are we doing? Why make a a salmon basins plan. So the purpose of this plan is to identify and support salmon habitat and water quality restoration and protection priorities. We're looking to integrate existing and potential surface water management and planned elements of the comprehensive plan. And what we're looking to do is to have something that spans jurisdictional boundaries so that where the watersheds extend outside of the city, you know, those things that happen upstream affect what happens downstream in the city. So it includes that as well. And this is intended to be kind of a science-based foundation to help with comprehensive plan updates, stormwater planning, and climate resilience. And the reason we're looking at these multiple scales is that we want to be able to identify meaningful actions that can be implemented both at the site scale and then at a broader scale as well. So specifically to build the Salmonid Basin Plan, we're developing a GIS-based fish habitat model. And we've got the extent that we're looking at in orange, the broader basin for all the streams that flow into the city. And we're looking to evaluate salmonid habitat conditions across this broader area. The purpose of this GIS-based plan is because GIS is a great tool for being able to overlay all of this information together. We're looking to integrate information on fish habitat, water quality, land use, stormwater, and climate data into a single planning framework. And the goal with this is to strike a balance between water quality and fish habitat needs and the needs for development. One way that this will be used is to identify and assess over time whether restoration efforts are leading to measurable improvements and identification of areas to prioritize for land preservation. So that's what we're doing. Why are we doing this? So the big one, of course, is to protect salmon and surface water quality. So salmon are keystone species. So if salmon are doing well, everybody is doing well. The conditions that help salmon thrive are good for people as well. So healthy streams and lakes reflect overall community well-being. This project is also intended to help meet regulatory requirements. So several state and federal laws require protection of salmon habitat and also integration with stormwater planning. So this is intended to provide a framework for that. More on why we're doing this. This project is intended to also help deliver community benefits like clean water, reduced flood risks, accessible recreation, and preserved open space. Part of the funding mechanism for this requires that we address climate resilience as well. So, you know, as temperatures get warmer, we have more floods, we have lower stream flows. This is a threat to salmon water quality and to infrastructure. So planning now helps to reduce those future risks. And then this is also intended to help guide investments. So we want to identify, prioritize, and plan for new and infrastructure retrofits and policy changes. And I wanted to mention here that the city is also doing a critical areas ordinance. And so we are giving some thought to how best to make sure that all of this information gets integrated together. Okay. So that's the what and the why. And now to give a little overview of what we've done to date. So this project was broken into 2 fiscal periods. The first phase was for the first biennium that ended in June of this year. The second phase is through June of 2027. So in the first portion of the project, we were focused on a lot of planning related activities. So we were looking to identify available data and gaps. We collected data, including information on streams, riparian canopy, floodplains, equity, and identified where there were gaps so we could plan for how to fill those. And then a big component of this first phase of the project was to assess available GIS models. So look at what models are out there and to develop a framework that helps to tie this all together from start to finish. So we're using what we're calling a framing question approach to this, and we'll go over that a little bit more in the next slides. But the idea is we have a question we're trying to answer. We are associating data we've collected with that question, doing analysis, getting output, and that's leading directly to recommendations for policy action. So it's really a focus of this to, I see a lot of projects where you collect all of the data under the sun and then try to figure out what to do with it. And this is more about, we want to start with the questions and identify what we need from that and where we're headed. So framing questions, we develop these in two categories. So from our perspective, there's two types of locations that we want to be able to hone in on these maps and overlay together. So the first is problem-focused questions, and these are questions that are asking, where are conditions degraded currently? The other bin of questions are solution-focused questions that ask where are there opportunities for improvement. So by having those two components together, we're able to overlay and answer specific questions. And so some examples of problem-focused framing questions. We have 6 of them that we're trying to answer, and I won't read all of them since you have them there in your packet. But for example, we might be trying to measure the attribute of riparian vegetation and land cover. And so the framing question there is, where is the riparian vegetation sparse, degraded, or fragmented? So we would be starting with that question, using that to identify areas for focus at both the site scale and at broader, sub-basin and watershed scales. Solution-focused framing questions. So an example for this one would be land use policy. So where should zoning or planning policies steer development away from habitat sensitive areas? So in this case, that would be an overlay of looking at current land use with the results of some of the problem-focused framing questions to identify that nexus of, we have sensitive habitat here, we have priorities for growth, and how do we find the best balance between them? The other thing that we've done to date is we've been focusing on community outreach. So we developed a community outreach plan. The goal of that plan is to raise awareness, inform the planning, promote equity, build support, and encourage stewardship. We have already started collaborating with tribal partners, agency stakeholders, and the Planning and Community Development Department. We have our next check-in with our partners on this project coming up in November to talk more specifically about how we're going to analyze the data and get input on that. So the goal is to have involvement from them and from the public at various stages during this project to make sure we're on the right track. We've also developed a project website. We have on that project website a map that allows the public to go in and add a comment about things that, concerns, opportunities, 4 categories, which I should have written down because I knew I would forget them. 4 categories. That is live on the website now. We're going to be producing a version of that that's translated into Spanish, and that should be up this week as well. And we've also developed a project one-pager that can be handed out at community events that has a QR code to the website. So what's coming next? This project, the grant is through the middle of 2027. We're aiming to get as much of this done in 2026 as possible. So this fall, what we're focused on is community outreach. We're working on tree canopy mapping. So we're going to be completing that by the end of the year. And that's has a dual purpose. It's both to support this overall modeling effort, and it's an NPDES permit requirement that's upcoming. So we're getting that, tackling that first to have that done well ahead of the NPDES deadlines. We are going to be focused on existing conditions mapping through the end of the year and producing an existing conditions portfolio based on our framing questions. And we'll continue to have tribal and agency stakeholder coordination. And in winter of next year, we will have kind of our first outreach and workshop #1 milestone. And the emphasis on that one will be to share the results of the existing conditions mapping and to solicit feedback on that. At the same time, we'll start the modeling process in GIS. So that's the part that's really particularly fun for me. Spring of 2026, we'll have draft model output and a modeling summary report. And then in summer of next year, we will have our second outreach workshop with an emphasis on those draft model results. So we want to make sure what's coming out of the model, the areas that are showing as high priority based on our framing questions, track with what folks know to be the case from living in the city. And then we'll be incorporating that feedback and finalizing the model and working on developing that draft plan. And that's where we will be recommending policy actions and things along those lines and how this gets folded into the comprehensive plan updates in the future and other planning efforts. And then the final plan we're looking to wrap up in fall next year. So that's the end of my formal presentation. To start with, are there any general questions that we can answer?
Yeah, I have one quick question. As part of your spatial framework, has there been any thought about an analysis on accommodating population increases, housing development? I mean, this is all good stuff, but what's it going to cost?
I definitely think that the areas of future growth and zoning changes will be part of this analysis so that we can identify, areas that maybe are not fully developed right now, but are maybe in the future to be able to kind of incorporate into this. And I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Shannon.
Yeah, I can add to that. So that'll be something that we look at when we look at this model is where do we have planned development or where do we see in our comprehensive plan where we have areas to develop? And then how do we look at that in conjunction with preservation of water quality and salmon habitat? And then how do we look at making those different policies or project actions to kind of blend that all together? Does that answer your question?
Not really.
Okay. Can you ask it again? Maybe I can try to speak to it better.
We're going through our critical areas update, right?
Mm-hmm.
And potentially, I mean, I've been told that there really won't be any effect on buffers and so forth, but yet we're talking about another layer that's coming on top of that with this that will certainly impact buffers when you're talking about water quality improvements, critical areas for salmon, things of that sort. And so there is a cost to all that stuff. And we are mandated to accept certain population under growth management. We have to provide housing and development activities, not provide, but allow for that to happen. And every time we do that, we constrain ourselves from allowing things to happen, and the costs go up for doing that. So it's a noble activity to do this, but I'm wondering what the cost is to actually achieve this. And if we don't have that discussion, it seems like we're going down a road of utopic fairy tales in the sense that it's great to do all this stuff, but we don't know what it's going to cost us.
Yeah.
And right now, this is being funded through the Climate Commitment Act, which we're all paying in our gas tax right now. And so it's just kind of like, it'd be nice to have a general idea of what the impacts of all these new regulations are going to be on costs and on property owners for that matter.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I will say, so with the critical area ordinance update, there is look at the impact with the buffers needing to increase. Dave Levitin, he's here tonight and he can speak to it a little bit more as well, but he gave a presentation to the Planning Commission last week. And part of what we're hoping that this basins plan does is actually help supplement and mitigate some of the buffer increases that we may be mandated to do. And so that we can look at specific areas where we have science-based decisions where we may be able to not have as large of a buffer and be able to have more development. And how do we average that out while we still protect the natural resources? So I think that there's some give and take with it there. And it's the intent is to work with our planning department and collaborate and to be able to use this science-based data to actually help make those decisions on how do we change our buffers and how do we still meet those regulatory requirements to change the buffers, but balance that with our development. And I don't know, Dave, if you had anything else you wanted to with the critical areas.
Sure, I can just give a quick update, and we are planning on providing a work session with the city council in a couple of weeks, but there are some increases for stream buffers, basically shifting to kind of a more riparian management based approach. The Department of Fish and Wildlife would like cities to incorporate buffers that are based on the maximum potential tree height of a 200-year-old tree. And that would essentially establish the width of your riparian buffer zone, what's called a riparian management zone, or RMZ. So we are having discussions with WDFW. One of our initial reactions and responses was related to how this would impact our ability to achieve our employment and housing growth targets and accommodate our projected population. I'm actually talking with WDFW tomorrow specifically about that and how we need to balance environmental protection with other goals within the Growth Management Act, because there are a lot of competing goals. So these are all things that are definitely on our mind, and that we need to have those conversations with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to help to balance these competing interests.
I guess I'd just like to present a different lens that I see this through. I appreciate you bringing up the point that salmon are a keystone species. I think that we don't talk about that enough. And, people talk about wanting to have more salmon, and it's not just about like wanting to have more salmon. Like, we want to have a healthy ecosystem and a healthy population. And so there is a financial cost, but there's also a cost to humanity to not move in this direction. And it's a balance. And I think I appreciate that Councilman Peter Sagan is bringing up the concern. I also think there are concerns if we aren't planning and we're not looking at this and we're not being assertive about how we're going to move forward. That isn't necessarily about money, but is about health and safety of our community. So just, I have a different lens that I see that through.
I'm curious, are our streams and salmon population threatened currently?
We don't know. We don't have like a good inventory of the health of our streams. We haven't done a comprehensive study to look at the riparian area, to look at encroachment where we have development, to look at our stormwater infrastructure. That's part of what this is going to do, this giving us that baseline information. And with this GIS approach, you kind of look at all those things in conjunction with each other. And then we start to identify areas, well, where do we have a good healthy stream corridor that we want to potentially preserve, or where do we have maybe degraded water quality where we need to do some sort of restoration? And that may look like riparian zone restoration, but it may also look like upgrading our stormwater infrastructure. So that's kind of part of it. This does sound, I think it's a really neat project. It's a lot of it does correspond with our planning and community development, our critical area ordinance update. There's a lot of NPDES requirements too that are kind of folded into this. And it's really looking at it as this holistic, comprehensive approach for how we can make decisions at that watershed scale so that we make specific decisions for specific water bodies. And so that we're not just applying kind of blanket regulatory requirements that may be too restrictive in one area and not restrictive enough in another. So, yeah. But we don't have, to answer your specific question, I do not have a specific list of which ones are highly degraded.
You can have that tomorrow.
I could probably come up with something tonight, maybe. But we do have a web map that if you know of concerns, you can add your information onto that web map.
What other cities are doing watershed studies?
A lot of the other cities are too, to various extent. There's the Stormwater Management Action Plan is a requirement for all NPDES permit holders. And so this project, it has a lot of components of that Stormwater Management Action Plan, the SMAP. And we're just kind of taking it a little bit further. We have this funded project through Commerce, and we're just kind of looking at all of our watersheds. Other cities, Redmond, Marysville, they have watershed-based approaches. City of Bothell also has it. Other cities look at specific watersheds to focus in on specific action planning, but they have, as part of this original SMAP process, every city had to look at all of their watersheds.
So we're looking at a watershed that's north of us and goes south of us and outside of our boundaries. If we find something specific in those areas, what could we do about it? I mean, one thing that happened many, many years ago is the chicken farm shut down. And that increased our water quality immensely basically overnight. I guess it actually took several years, but still, when we got rid of the chicken farm up there, we had less of a problem coming in, the phosphorus problem coming into the lake, for instance, because that was a direct line to the lake. That's outside of Lake Stevens. We didn't do anything to accomplish that. But if we find things that are upstream that are outside of our jurisdiction, what can we do about that?
So part of this stakeholder discussion meeting that we have, City of Marysville's in it, Snohomish County, WashDOT, Tulalip Tribes, Fish and Wildlife, Department of Ecology. It's kind of everybody who's also surrounding us. And so when we look at this watershed GIS-based approach, if we do identify areas outside our city, there's potential coordination we can have with those other jurisdictions, but it also helps us identify, okay, well, maybe there's something outside of our control. So what can we focus on that's inside of our control? If we have impacts like you mentioned that are degrading water quality, that are outside of our control, well, maybe we're not going to be focusing all of our resources on that. Or what can we do within our boundaries to mitigate some of that? So I mean, we can't force them to do anything, but we are working on building those relationships and coordinating with those surrounding agencies as well.
I guess I just have a comment. Shannon, I just want to thank you and your team for the hard work you're doing with the stormwater management. It's important that we are good stewards of the environment. We have the largest lake in Snohomish County. Our water quality is the best, because of your efforts. And so to Kim's question, and I just noticed up where Lake Cassidy is, we're showing like full degradation. And so I'm curious, we're in a largely undeveloped area, and I realize you won't have the answer to this, most likely, but I would like to know why that area it's totally degraded, and yet we have a fully developed area entirely around the lake that has significantly higher quality. And so I guess that doesn't make sense to me in my simple brain.
Yeah.
So if someone could explain that or provide some input, and to Kim's question, like how we manage that, because that's in the county. The largest degraded area that would impact that, the area here to the southwest, that looks like it's downhill. And so that would be less of the water would flow downhill, that would flow uphill to the lake. So I think that's less impactful.
Yeah. There's a lot of different things to look at when you look at impacts to water quality. You may have an area that's highly developed that has better water quality because you have mitigation measures in place. So that's your stormwater infrastructure, that's treatment area. A lot of agriculture areas, like a lot of farm animals, that's a huge impact to water quality. If you have pasture lands, that degrades the natural riparian vegetation and buffer, that can impact water quality. So there's a lot of things to think about when you think about impacts to water quality, and it's not always buildings and roads. It can be as simple as farmlands and cattle and horses and chickens. So there's other things to look at. I don't know. I kind of took over for Jen. Jen, I don't know if you have anything else to add. So we do have some specific questions. I think a lot of it we've probably touched on, but maybe we can just run through these. And if the council has any other thoughts on these specific discussion items, we'd love to hear it.
Thanks, Shannon. Yep. So the first question that we had for you all is, So what outcomes matter most to you for judging success? So is that improved water quality, community co-benefits, flood risk reductions, something else?
I want data focused things that we can quantify. I don't want touchy feely things like I want something we can actually look at, say like our water clarity is 35 feet in the lake. We can say, yes, that is excellent water quality. It's the best we've ever had, and say, or we're not treating for this for phosphorus, excessive phosphorus. This is how many months or years we've gone in between that, or we have X number more of salmon coming through as a result of that. So something is quantifiable so we can chart our to improve.
I think those are all good successes up there.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this one? How should the city balance future development with protecting a sensitive salmon habitat?
Carefully and with much consternation.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to say, I think that the salmon habitat is very important. And as you mentioned, it's not just important to people that like salmon, but the whole ecosystem it's one of the things we judge it on. So I think this is really important to look at. And I think it's something the city does need to take seriously. I don't think it's a discretionary item. I think it's a necessary item. And I've certainly seen, I'm sure other people as well, little video clips shared online of some of our salmon when they're really busy coming through our city. I know I've seen them in my neighborhood, and I think this was actually stormwater that was just corrected on Catherine Drive, just down the street. We removed some trees. We removed vegetation that I actually live in that area, and it had become so overgrown. What used to be a lake that the kids would go frog hunting in, not lake, but I guess pond, became a pond full of nothing but debris and leaves, and the overgrowth of vegetation. I'd walk past it with my dog, hoping a coyote wasn't lurking 6 feet away. So the city going in and cleaning that up and opening that up has made a dramatic difference. So when I think about these types of things, I wonder if some things just as simple as that would be beneficial to our salmon runs, just opening them up so the water can flow. But I do think it's something that we need to take seriously.
Yeah, and what we heard from Councilmember Peter Shagan is looking at what's that cost and the impact to our city is trying to balance this preservation, restoration, with also our economic development and our future growth. So we heard that.
Right, last
So
question.
Can I just throw something in there? We have a youth advisory council. We've got really outstanding young people in our community. 25% of our population's over 20. I think it would be important. I remember I grew up in Bellevue. Coal Creek went through floodplains there in Bellevue. I remember as a kid going there in elementary school and watching the salmon go out there. And, that impacted me to realize, hey, I need to be a good steward of the environment, make sure this can continue. And now they're doing the salmon restoration project under I-90, you can see under by Honda Bellevue, to continue to make sure that that is still functional. So I think it's critical that we involve the young people, so they will be carrying on this when us old people, move along, and but I really think they have a lot to offer, and I'd love to see whatever input they have to share in this area, including some of our AP government folks that are here tonight.
Shannon, do we have a Zen City page on this project?
We do. That QR code will take you to the Zen City page.
So last question from us. How would the council like to be involved in shaping and communicating this effort?
Are you asking about our involvement in communicating what you're doing, like to the city, or communication to us?
I think could be both. I think when I was putting this question together, I was thinking more of the first
Yeah, I think for me, if information like this is going to be citywide or on the city website, having presentations like this helps me answer questions when folks are asking, what is this all about? What does this mean? So I appreciate the information and the slides when there is public facing information and things happening.
I guess the only, I would ask that it be involved in some way into the Isle of Lake program, if there was a way to marry those two. Because Isle of Lake is an awesome project, and having done that myself, realize areas that I can be more responsible as a citizen to do that. And I think there's other people that may have limitations like I had before I had better information.
And then with the council, so we heard that bringing this information back. So as we start moving and we start collecting the data and running that kind of first analysis, we'll bring another presentation back to the council so that you can kind of see some of our preliminary results and what we're thinking about moving forward.
Thank you.
That's good.
Yeah, any other thoughts or questions on this? No?
Nope, great presentation. Thanks for being
All
here.
right, thanks,
Yeah.
Jen.
Thank you so much.
All right, let's
Thank you.
move forward with David. You are up to bat with step housing, co-living housing code amendments.
All right. All right, David Levitan, Principal Planner. So we just wanted to bring this topic before the City Council, just on an informational basis. We've been working with the Planning Commission the last couple months. So just wanted to introduce the topic and get some initial council feedback. So step housing is a continuum of housing types that's specifically the STEP. The acronym stands for, the S is for emergency shelters, the T is for transitional housing, the E for emergency housing, and the P for permanent supportive housing. This basically came out of House Bill 1220 back in 2021. If you'll think back to the comprehensive plan, we were required to change the way that we did our housing analysis and developed our housing element to comply with House Bill 1220 to basically show that we have adequate capacity across a wide variety of incomes and housing types, and that includes things like emergency housing and permanent supportive housing. So we achieved that last year as part of the comp plan update. We are now required to update our development regulations to reflect that within our development code, that we allow these in particular zones, that we have regulations that are constructed in a particular way. So for emergency housing and shelters, basically a big part of the step housing regulations that cities are required to adopt are that for emergency housing and shelters, they're required to be permitted anywhere where hotels are allowed. In the city of Lake Stevens, that's generally within our commercial zones that coincide with our adopted sub areas, as well as with Soper Hill, a couple properties up off of Grade and Highway 92, and then a couple properties kind of along the northwest shore of the lake, plus a couple down on Highway 204 as you get closer to the trestle. Those are the pink ones. So downtown, 20th Street Southeast Corridor, and Lake Stevens Center / Frontier Village being the main areas. So there are some specific regulations and specific requirements as we develop our local ordinance that we're required to comply with. That includes not being overly restrictive on the religious organizations, as well as cities are allowed to limit occupancy, spacing, and intensity, so can create buffers between uses, buffers between other types of uses, as long as you tie those back and provide a nexus between the regulation and the general public health and safety. So as we look at transitional and permanent supportive housing, the areas where those are required to be allowed are a lot more expansive. It's not just the areas where hotels are allowed, but any zone where residential units are allowed. That includes both single family and multifamily residential units. So that's basically the entirety of the city, with the exception of our industrial area in the northeast corner and the public, semi-public, so open space, schools, parks. Basically, those are the two main categories where these uses are not required to be allowed. Very similarly, we can limit occupancy and spacing, things along those lines. An additional component of these two types is that the requirements cannot be different than other types of housing. So really the recognition that permanent supportive housing and transitional housing should be treated in basically the same way that other types of housing are treated. So that is something to keep in mind. So as far as the Planning Commission, so we've had 4 work sessions so far with the Planning Commission. They've been doing incredible work on this, providing really good feedback to staff. So this was introduced back in the spring. We discussed kind of the general scope and what the Planning Commission would like to see in draft code language. That was back on May 21st and June 3rd. We shared sample ordinances from a couple different cities that have already adopted their step housing regulations. There's a wide variety of ways that cities are handling this. Some are basically treating all 4 types as any other type of housing, not having any sort of land use process, basically just adding them to their permissible use tables. Then there are cities that have very prescriptive standards that have buffers as much as up to half a mile in between. And so there, we wanted to provide those kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum to the Planning Commission. We got some feedback generally that the majority would like to fall somewhere in the middle to have adequate kind of health and safety protections while also recognizing our need to provide housing for a wide variety of you know, the wide continuum of Edmonds, like Stevens residents as far as the type of housing that they need. So we came back on August 18th and shared draft code language with the Planning Commission, kind of with a split approach, basically as kind of the direction from the Department of Commerce is kind of treating the transitional and permanent supportive housing like any other housing, just having those as outright permitted uses, and then creating a land use review process for emergency housing and for emergency shelters. As part of that review, developing supplementary use regulations that include things like requiring a site management plan, as far as things like parking, site access, site security. So those are all things that are included, I think, starting on page 208 of your packet. It really gets into the supplementary use regulations proposed for emergency housing and emergency shelters. And then a lot of the discussion, especially over the last 2 work sessions, was on buffers, both between individual uses, so in between individual emergency shelters, and then also between emergency shelters and emergency housing and what we've deemed as kind of protected uses, similar to what exists for the buffers that exist around marijuana facilities. Right now, we have supplementary use regulations that require a 1,000-foot buffer between marijuana facilities and things like parks and schools and childcare centers. The 1,000 feet we looked at, that seemed a little bit too excessive. It basically eliminated large chunks of all of our sub areas and kind of seemed to not coincide with the intent of the best practices and the guidance from the Department of Commerce. So as mentioned by Councilmember Donahue in his council member report, we did have our intern Cameron and Proud Lake Stevens High School graduate prepare some maps for us. So this is one looking, and again, this is specifically related to emergency housing and emergency shelters. So this is basically establishing a 300-foot buffer. So as you'll remember, the red is everywhere where they would be permitted. And in this map, the yellow is basically the areas that would then not be allowed to be sited with these types of uses. This is where the 300-foot buffer would extend from a park or from a school, from a commercial childcare center, from a library. So basically, the majority of the areas outside of downtown Lake Stevens would still allow for these uses. If you look up in the downtown area on the northeast corner of the lake, even at 300 feet, given Mount Pilchuck, given the commercial childcare center across the street from here, and especially due to North Cove Park, it eliminates most of downtown as far as being a potential site for emergency housing and emergency shelters. As you look down on 20th Street, there's some impact from Caballero Mid-High and from Caballero Park, as well as from a childcare slash preschool there, kind of near 20th and South Lake Stevens. And then in the kind of the Lake Stevens Center area, Frontier Village, there's another childcare center, as well as it gets touched just very minorly by Frontier Heights Park. So that's a 300-foot buffer. When you bump it up to a 500-foot buffer, it brings in a couple of additional properties. It extends a little bit more into Soper Hill area. It basically eliminates all of downtown Lake Stevens when you kind of come from both. Essentially, you're coming from the south from the Boys and Girls Club, the north from Kidsway, the east from the elementary school, and the west from North Cove Park. It basically makes it so there's not really any place within downtown Lake Stevens where you'd be able to have these sites. It has less of a it has a minor expansive impact in the other sub areas, but not nearly as much as within downtown Lake Stevens. And then just to show you what it looks like for 1,000 feet, it basically expands the yellow area, covers the whole west side of SR9 within the Lake Stevens Center area. It eliminates all of Soper Hill. It brings in one of the properties up off of Highway 92 in grade. And then basically just for the 20th Street, just kind of the central portion of the sub area would be able to be sited with these types of uses if there was a 1,000-foot buffer. So some of the discussion that we had with the Planning Commission related to the potential impacts of the protected buffers was that we can't create regulations that effectively prohibit the siting of these uses. Kind of the largest impact, again, would be within downtown Lake Stevens, whether it's a 300-foot buffer, a 500-foot buffer. Just kind of the confluence of different protected uses results in most of that not being able to be cited with these uses. Again, there needs to be a nexus between the regulations and the public health and safety. So we would need to make those findings as part of the adoption of our ordinance. And some of the discussions that we had in some of the additional analysis that we've done is, you know, if we say had the protected buffers around schools and around childcare centers, but say reduce, remove the required buffer around parks or around libraries, what would those impacts be? And would there be any sort of Planning Commission support for that? There wasn't consensus among planning commissioners. There were some that wanted to have a very hands-off approach and rely on the supplementary use regulations that are included starting on page 208 of your packet. There are others that wanted to have much more prescriptive standards. I would say the majority of planning commissioners still favored having the protected buffers around schools, childcare centers, parks, and libraries. And so we did just want to show the city council, and we do plan to show this to the planning commission as well, what it would look like if we say removed the buffer around parks and around libraries. So it would open up a little bit more of downtown Lake Stevens by not having North Cove Park. You would have kind of the eastern 1/3 of the sub area that could be sited with these types of uses. It would expand the areas where they could be allowed both within 20th Street and Lake Stevens Center. It wouldn't really have an impact on Soper Hill or some of the other areas because those areas are primarily impacted by their proximity to schools. So just wanted to have that information available to the city council as part of this discussion, just as far as something that we've talked about a bit with the planning commission, and that, we'd appreciate any feedback from the city council on as well. So that's kind of the main point of the step housing regulations. As part of that, under a separate House bill that was adopted back in 2023. There is another housing code implementation item that needs to be adopted by the end of 2025, and that's specifically related to co-living housing. So these are things like boarding houses, kind of alternatives to multifamily residential or to other types of housing. Basically, what the House bill stated is that cities are required to adopt local ordinance or defer to the model ordinance adopted by the state related to these uses. Basically, these uses need to be allowed anywhere that a multifamily residential development of 6 or more units is allowed. So that's primarily within our multifamily residential zone, as well as our commercial zones. Parking is limited to 0.25 spaces per bedroom, so that would be a change from our existing regulations. But in general, this is a very minor update compared to the step housing, and we figured we would just roll this into our step housing ordinance just to knock out both of these code implementation items at once through one ordinance. So we will be issuing our 60-day notice to the Department of Commerce. We're anticipating bringing this back to the Planning Commission for a public hearing, either at the second meeting in October or the first meeting in November. And then obviously working around the public hearing schedule for the budget and a couple other items, bringing it back to the City Council for their required public hearing. Again, this is something we need to adopt by the end of 2025. So yeah, just wanted to provide this information to the City Council. Happy to answer any questions. And yeah, with that, I'm done.
So I have a question. A lot of talk about buffers. What's the inherent danger of emergency housing that warrants buffers?
Yeah, and that's something that we would need to, really make findings related to. So that was, this was direction generally provided by the Planning Commission. I think the thought is just the proximity, especially to uses that are primarily directed towards children, that there might be some need for some additional protected buffers. And so that's kind of first and foremost.
So if you look at the definition of emergency housing, the definition of emergency housing is somebody who's about to become homeless. What's the inherent danger?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that as far as I think that's the opinion of each individual. So it's something that especially if the concern is specifically related to emergency housing and not both emergency housing and emergency shelters, this is something that if the emergency housing doesn't warrant any type of protective buffers, but emergency shelters potentially do, we could revise the supplementary use regulations to make it so that they don't apply to emergency housing if that's the direction from council. And this is, exactly why we wanted to bring it to the City Council to get their perspective before we move forward with the public hearings with the Planning Commission. So we make sure that we hear from a wide variety of opinions on this from the policymakers.
Maybe I'll take a stab at this answer as well. So I would say there aren't any inherent dangers, but as Dave started his presentation, we looked at a variety of models from different communities and how they've approached this. The first thing we created the set of supplementary regulations. When we did that, we looked at a few regulations. As Dave already mentioned, we looked at some of the methodology we used in the past for, say, marijuana siting, where there's been a separation among uses. We looked at our temporary encampment regulations to see how we had handled that, where we came up with a management plan. And then in some ways, we looked at our short-term rental regulations that also came up with a code of conduct and management. So if there is a facility that's generally complying with your supplementary use regulations, they have the management plan, they're taking care of themselves, there should be really no impact. If a facility is not run well, and say you have derelict vehicles parked on the street adjacent to this emergency facility, there is a potential to create some public harm. So that's just the balance we tried to bring to the Planning Commission, is to see, this wide spectrum of, you can handle it this way just through having prescriptive regulations, Or if you aren't comfortable with just prescriptive regulations, you can do that and put buffers, which then limits the number of facilities in the community. And you do have an expert on your council that may want to add a perspective to the answer to that question.
Councilmember Donahue has his hand up.
Yeah. So just really quick, based on observing the discussions amongst the planning commissioners, I think one thing that's really important for us to wrap our heads around, and again, this is where Councilmember Jorstad's experience will be very helpful, is what exactly are the definitions of these different types of housings and who might be living there? To answer your question, Councilmember Daughtry, I think any concern around particular types of housing stems from, wondering about, or it stemmed from wondering about, could it be associated with any sort of criminal activity? The common ones that people tend to think of are, drug use, or someone who's maybe suffering some kind of housing crisis due to some sort of, criminal past. But I think it's very important for us to, like I said, wrap our heads around maybe that type of circumstance doesn't even apply to a lot of these types of housing. Maybe it does, but as far as what is the danger, that's what we need to figure out, is what are the potential types of danger for each type of housing. Do those dangers apply, and do we need to buffer accordingly?
Well, we have those problems without emergency shelters. I mean, if we had drug houses in the city, we know where they're at. I'm not getting it. What am I missing?
Are there statistics out there of other areas in, we'll say, Western Washington, where they've already implemented this? Is there any way we could get some data to show the impacts of the surrounding area and whether or not these protections are needed?
I don't know if we would have data, that maybe paints that picture that can really get to that particular question, especially since most cities have adopted their regulations relatively recently. We could probably do a survey of cities that have these types of protected buffers. I don't know if we could get to what impact they've had. And, I did have a conversation with Councilmember Jorstad a few weeks ago, because this is kind of her area of expertise. And I mean, one thing to keep in mind as we develop these regulations, it is already going to be difficult to cite these just from an economic side of things, given the cost of land here, the difficulties in securing funding for these types of uses to make them so that they can actually operate within this economic environment. So that's something to keep in mind as well, as far as kind of when considering the extent and the prescriptiveness of the regulations. Kind of long story short, we can try to get as much data as possible, but I'm not quite sure there'd be much that would actually kind of answer that question.
For sake of time, this is just letting us know what's going on. We can put this up in our brain housing groups and come back with some other questions on another time, unless you have something pressing or direction he wants to go to. And I would also just be real careful what you ask for, because it takes a lot of staff time. When we start running down rabbit holes and asking for lots of stuff, that's staff time. And that's a lot of expenditures. And I'm not saying you shouldn't be informed, but make sure that it matters. Really
I'm a little
matters.
concerned of things being made based upon bias opinion
Yeah.
versus data. Yeah. That's why I said, I am aware that will take staff time, but I know I am not qualified to base this on an opinion.
Yeah, understandable. Yeah.
I'd like 30 seconds. I'll be brief.
You have 32, Angie.
Oh, gosh, thanks. I just really appreciate, I did have a chance to read through the planning commission notes, and they've put a lot of work and a lot of time into providing us with this recommendation. So I want to publicly thank them for their work. I think council member Daughtry brings up a really good point, that there are folks, our neighbors right now are struggling with, unmet behavioral health needs, or maybe they're couch surfing, and they're not in a supported environment. I think the availability of a staffed emergency shelter provides a safe place for folks to go and for folks to get support. Given some of the changes that are happening in our community, Medicaid cuts in particular, the likelihood of homelessness is rising is real. And I think that that we need as a community to look at lowering barriers to have the resources to help folks rather than increasing barriers. So it's my 2 cents for now.
All right, great. Hey, David, appreciate your report, and we're looking forward to your next steps.
All right, thank you.
All right, so with that, we're going to move into an executive session. Ms. Kelly, would you like to announce that for
Great.
us?
How long do we need? Can we do it by 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to recess into executive session, confidential session of the council per RCW 4230-110. Topic is potential litigation for litigation. We will be done by 8 o'clock.
And there's no action to follow.
Yeah, no action to follow. We'll come back and just adjourn.
Thanks for coming tonight. All right, we are back from executive session. There's no action to follow. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Second. All's in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?